So now I'm recording the session for future reference and also for the people that that were not able to connect. Okay, so what else I want to say about general things about this session. One of the good points about this session is that we want to guide you through the available job aids that have been created and available in relation to movement types and their impact in FM. Okay, so during the session and also as the last slide, you have a link to the available job aids, and we will use them in the demo. For example, there is a job aid on the different movement types for consumption, either return, and the explanation of that. There is also another one regarding the posting schema. So we will discuss a little bit about each of these job aids so that you know what's available for you for your reference. Okay. All right. So let's move ahead. So what's important about the movement types? So as we said, the movement type selection, all right, the movement type selection triggers the impacts, right, the downstream impacts in FA, FM, and FI. So what you need to consider in order to select the proper movement type, okay? So you are more conversant about the operational part of the movement type, right? How it affects your inventory. So type of inventory, you are really familiar with that. So movement type will have an impact in your inventory. Either you want to receive items in your inventory, you want to issue out, for example, what we talk about consumption movement types. There are also other movement types to transfer, right? Items from one storage location to the other, what we call transfer between locations. There are other movement types that are used to transfer items between statuses. Okay, for example, between blocked to unrestricted, this is what we call transfer between status, or even there are movement types to transfer from one material to another material. Okay, so this is what we call transfer between materials. We have also movement types to return items to stock, movement types to scrap materials, and for each movement type there is a related reversal movement type that you can use in case we did any mistake with the posting and we want to reverse that posting. Okay, these are the scrapping and reversal movement types. What else you need to consider when selecting the proper movement type? So in case you want to issue out materials, you need to consider if the materials you are issuing out from your inventory, you want to issue them out using a cost center or in relation to a project, a WBS, or in relation to an internal order. Okay. So depending on the type of consumption, you'll need to select as account assignment or a different coding block, a different account assignment details. Okay. Then the effect on the budget is one thing you need to consider in order to select the proper movement type. Okay, and then we'll discuss about what do we mean by effect on the budget. So basically we have three different types of effect. We have the statistical movement types that don't have any impact in FM. Okay, only statistical for reporting purposes. Then we have the real movement types that have real impact in FM, and we have two different ones. One related to cost recovery, okay, one related to storage locations that are related to cost recovery fund, and other budget relevant movement types that don't have any cost recovery associated with them. Okay. So keep in mind that for budget relevant cost recovery, here we are talking about for example, issuing out inventory or transferring inventory from different storage locations. So the budget relevant cost recovery is used whenever we have a storage location that is related to a cost recovery fund, like a 10 RCR or 20 PCR. Okay, so most of the missions don't have yet any storage location related to these cost recovery funds. Okay, and then another thing you need to consider is the value of the goods, okay, you want to post in your inventory. Okay, remember that here we have the concept of the moving average price, right? The MAP. So whenever you receive in your inventory an item, okay, as new, this MAP, this moving average price, is recalculated based on all the different receipts you have done for that material in that in your plant. Okay, and then this moving average price is used to calculate the value of all the postings. Okay, for example, if you're doing a budget relevant posting, okay, so the MAP will be considered when you are issuing out a material or when you are transferring a material between different storage locations. So this moving average price is important. Okay, and then, for example, you have movement types, like, for example, additions to stock, where you are able, when adding an item into stock, for example, adding a material that, or adding an item that don't come from a purchase order, you have to add them to a stock with a value. Then you can specify the value at which these items can appear in your stock. Okay, so there are some movement types where you will be able to specify the value for that item that is coming as new, and that's going to be the value that will be the value of the item in your inventory and will affect, right, the moving average price for all those materials in that plant. Okay, so Ikram, I think you have a question. I'm going to unmute you. All right, so please go ahead.
Yeah, so I have a question for you.
Sure. Sorry, Ikram, we cannot hear you well. I don't know about the others, but the voice is breaking.
My question is about this budget relevant cost recovery.
Yeah.
Use this budget relevant cost recovery to post-stock between commission.
All right, Ikram, I cannot hear that well, but
I can't hear either, Leandro. Ikram, perhaps you can move closer to your microphone. I think you're quite a way away from it or something.
Yeah, try again, Ikram.
Let me try.
All right, Ikram, I cannot hear you well, but I think I know what you're referring to, because we have been discussing about that in separate emails about the issuance of items, okay, with the budget relevant concept, right? AMMOGIP and other related entities, and we have also the case of UNSO and UNSCO. Okay, so we will bear with us, Ikram, because we are going to discuss about that in the following slides. Okay, so you can make use of the chat, okay, because we cannot hear you that well. But wait 10-15 minutes, because we will discuss about the concept of budget relevant with cost recovery and without cost recovery. Okay. All right. So we were talking about the value of at which goods enter the inventory. So it can enter at the MAP. It can enter a specific value, or if the items are used, right? They are old as the valuation type. They normally enter in the stock as 0 because they are already used. Okay. So whenever you are issuing out, transferring, or returning items into stock, you need to think about at which value will those goods enter in your inventory. Okay. All right. So here in this session, we are going to mainly focus on the impacts in the budget, okay, on the selection of statistical versus budget relevant cost recovery or budget relevant without cost recovery. Okay, and as said before, if based on the feedback we need to organize additional sessions on any other topic, like for example consumption in relation to projects or in relation to internal orders, we can organize additional ones. Okay. All right. So talking about type of effect, everything, as we said, everything is driven by the movement type you choose. Okay. So when goods are issued out from a storage location, that movement can be considered non-budget relevant, or also called statistical. Okay, and basically in the missions, most of the issuance or most of the transfers are going to be statistical. So here in this case, we can think about moving stock to your section, okay, or to another section within the same mission, okay, that is part of the mission mandate. And if we are talking about non-budget relevant movement type, non-budget relevant postings, the budget will not be impacted. So neither the receiving nor the supplying budget will be affected by this posting. So whenever you select a non-budget relevant movement type, there will be no real impact in FM. Even if even if there will be some statistical postings, these postings are only for statistical purposes, for reporting purposes, but there is no real consumption of budget. Okay. And then we have the movement types that are used in budget relevant postings that really affect the budget of the receiving and the supplying party. Okay, so in case you move stock to another section or to another entity out of your mission mandate, right? For example, if we will discuss later about some scenarios that are related to projects, okay, issuance of materials to projects, okay, that can be also budget relevant. So if you are issuing out from your stock to another entity out of your mission mandate, these ones are considered budget relevant. Okay, and remember that budget relevant reservations, right, reservations that are used to trigger most of the postings, okay, the reservations require also the approval by the certifying officer. Okay. So for budget relevant postings, we have two different cases. Cases with cost recovery, and there are different movement types for scenarios with cost recovery and other set of movement types for scenarios without cost recovery. So think about cost recovery. So budget relevant with cost recovery can only be done in cases you have a storage location that is linked to cost recovery fund. So in most of the missions, that's not the case. So if I'm not mistaken, I just had a look yesterday to the list of storage locations and the FM derivations. And besides UNGSC, currently there are no missions with storage locations that are linked to cost recovery funds. But basically, the budget relevant with cost recovery can only be done when you have this type of storage locations linked to cost recovery funds like 10 RCR, 20 PCR, or 20 BLB. So the idea is that these storage locations are set up in order to provide cost recovery activities. So then even all the shopping carts and purchase orders are raised to procure items, to procure inventory for those cost recovery storage locations, right? And then everything that is issued out from those storage locations will be budget relevant and will be budget relevant with cost recovery, because those inventory or this inventory was purchased to perform cost recovery services. Okay. So budget relevant with cost recovery, the receiving party the receiving party budget is consumed. So the receiving entity that will receive the inventory will be charged for those items, and in FM you will see a real impact in the receiving party. Okay, so the receiving entity will be charged for that inventory items, for those inventory items. Okay, so we will see later on an example of these postings. And then for budget relevant without cost recovery, this budget relevant without cost recovery can be done even if you don't have a storage location that is linked to a cost recovery fund. Okay, and we'll talk about which are the example scenarios of this cost recovery, of this budget relevant without cost recovery. And the impact in FM, it's also the receiving entity is charged, and then the value of the stock is posted again to the both to the receiving entity and also to the sending entity. Okay.
Leandro, do you mind if I just give them some examples of these different ones? Okay, so in the first instance, we're going back to the non-budget relevant issuances out. This is stock that your mission perhaps is bought related to its mandated activities. So let's say that you have a bunch of VHF radios sitting in a warehouse, and let's say they're being procured using your security budget. Now, the security budget needs to issue some radios to people in finance or CMS, DMS. They just get issued out. Okay, so the security budget is not trying to return budget to their own fund center, because this is part of their mandated activities, is to provide these items to people within the mission, let's say. So that's an example of an issuance out, a non-budget relevant issuance out. Basically, the person that procured them, the fund center and fund that have procured them, are not trying to recover any cost for these items because it's part of their mandated activities. So then if we move down to budget relevant, the ones that we link to the movement types called with cost recovery, what we're talking about there are three very specific funds, and that you can think of them as revolving funds. Now, these funds are self-funding. So what that means is it's not something that we go to the member states and ask for money for. What we do is a part of, let's say, that the mission provides medical services to a range of other people, or perhaps they're providing administrative services, which is not really part of their mandated activities, but they're just doing it. But in order to be able to fund these activities, they need to recover costs to those people that they're providing those for example, vaccinations to, or services. So those are examples of when we do issuance with what's called cost recovery. And of course, we've also got 20 BLB in there, which is also a revolving type of fund. That's the SDS stock that comes from Brindisi. So that fund obviously needs to be reimbursed every time they send vehicles or generators or prefabs out, so they can buy those items back and have them ready for the next mission. So that's an example of cost recovery, a budget relevant issuance with cost recovery. As Leandro said, none of you really have that. I believe UNAMA at the moment is trying to set up some storage locations linked to the cost recovery fund 10 RCR, but we didn't really see the others. Probably many of your missions are doing cost recovery, because I think many missions have put in a cost plan, but from what we'd understood when we did our initial surveys, those cost plans and cost recovery activities that you're doing in emissions mainly involve services, don't really involve materials. So in the example of the cost with the budget relevant issuance without cost recovery, Leandro is going to go into those more. But these are sorts of things where we saw a lot of questions up front. We've got budget under a certain fund center, and we haven't set up a storage location for this. We only really need to buy a few items, but we need to be able to make sure the correct fund center is charged. So these are issuances where one storage location buys the item and their budget is hit. Let's say storage location A, who didn't really budget for these items, and buys them, and then they issue them using these movement types to storage location B. And we're going to talk about those more in the context of assets under, or Leandro will talk about them more in terms of cost, the issuance to assets under construction and those sorts of things. So I don't know, Leandro, if you want to save all of the questions to the end, or if you want to do a check to see if people have understood so far.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Chris. I think Ikram was indicating in the chat. So UMOGIP, in fact, is one of the examples, right, that Chris was saying about budget relevant without cost recovery, and also I think we have UNSO and UNSCO, right? So, for example, UMOGIP has an inventory, some of the items that in the end were parted for UMOGIP and then issued out to another entity out of the UMOGIP mandate, and then they want to issue out and charge UNAMA for those items, right? So they don't have a cost recovery storage location, and currently, if it's only one specific scenario, one specific cases, they can do it with a budget relevant without cost recovery. Okay, and
yeah, but one other really important point in this: if you're doing this a lot, so I'm going to give, let's say they're doing this a lot, and they need, and this other entity is needing to have a lot of inventory issued out to them, they're better off setting up their own storage locations, linked to their own fund center. The reason being is because those items need to show on the balance sheet really of the correct reporting entity. If we're talking about a few items here and there, it doesn't really matter, but if it's happening all of the time, we recommend that you set up a storage location linked to the correct fund center of who really is needing all of this equipment. But occasionally, it's not an issue.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So any questions so far before we move on? So we are going to keep on discussing about this budget relevant versus non-budget relevant concept. But before we move on, anything you want to ask? I think I will have to unmute you. So if you want to say anything, just raise your hand or use the chat. Okay. So I think Mustafa raise the hand. Okay. All right. So nothing, no questions yet. Okay, so let's move ahead, and we can always have questions later on, okay? All right, so let's reinforce the idea of budget relevant versus non-budget relevant, but we are going to start discussing about consumption movement types, okay? So the movement types used to issue items out of your stock. So everything is triggered by the movement type. So there will be no place either in the reservation or in the MIGO transaction where you will indicate if it's statistical or budget relevant. So everything is triggered by the movement type, by the selection of the movement type. So talking about consumption, you need to think about if the items being issued out from stock are going to be used in relation to a project, in relation to an internal order, or are going to be used out of internal orders and projects. So the goods issued to cost center will be used when there is no project or internal order related, okay? And in this case, we have the there are three different movement types to cover the different scenarios, right? So we have the statistical movement type to issue atom stock to a cost center when there is no project or internal order, and then we have the issuance, the real budget relevant issuance with a cost recovery, okay, when there is a cost recovery storage location, and the issuance, the budget relevant issuance with no cost recovery. Okay, so we have, depending on the movement type user inventory user select when you are doing the inventory posting, the impact in the budget will be different. Okay, so everything is triggered by the movement type. Same thing for if you want to issue out from your stock in relation to an internal order. So again, there are going to be three different movement types. One statistical, in this case it's 261, and then two budget relevant movement types, one with cost recovery and another one without cost recovery. And lastly, you can also issue out from your stock in relation to a project, in relation to WBS, and then later on we can discuss about the asset under construction and how that affects also, because an AUC is also considered as a project, and you can issue out materials that have to be related to that project. Okay. And then, Chris, if you want to say anything else about the AUCs, because the idea of the AUC is that all the issuance that are done in relation to that AUC can be tracked in a way, because in the end, the asset will have to be capitalized, so all the costs that have been issued to that to build that asset under construction will have to be monitored, and we have to be reported in order to properly capitalize the item of that asset. Okay, so AUC is an example of goods issued to project.
Yeah,
okay.
So a lot of your fellow mission staff went off recently and did training in assets under construction accounting. So what we're talking about here when we're talking about issuing from the warehouse, so let's say you've got a really big construction project in your mission, and they've procured items, and those items have been delivered to a storage location in the warehouse. Now, if they're saying, okay, I need you to issue out 50 windows for this new building that we're building, what you need to ask them is, okay, am I trying to affect the budget on this asset under construction, or do you just need to make sure that it's issued to the asset under construction? The difference is the following. So once you've done, let's say they say, look, we haven't budgeted for the materials under the assets under construction, but we need to capture the cost. So what you do there is a non-budget relevant issuance, a statistical issuance to the project, okay? If they say to you, yes, we need to make sure that this is reflected and reduces the budget of the asset under construction, then you will use the other issuance. They haven't popped up down the bottom. Yeah, so it's the last one. So that you use that very last one to affect the budget on the asset under construction. In pretty much all of the mission cases, you would never use that middle one there in related to an asset under construction.
Yeah, because remember that the ones that in order to issue out with cost recovery, then the inventory will have to come from storage location linked to cost recovery funds, right? So basically, we said that for most missions, they don't have, right, these storage locations linked to cost recovery fund. So so can we say, Chris, that if the project receives money, right, to pay for those materials that are in inventory, then the issuance has to be budget relevant in order to charge the project, right? Because if you remember well,
yep.
Because I'm talking to the GDP LPs, right? So we were saying when we were seeing in the workshop, in the training workshop we had, we we cannot purchase inventory items in relation to projects or to internal orders, right? So all inventory items are always charged to the fund of the receiving storage location, right? So the way to charge those items into the project is at the moment of issuance. So that's why when we are issuing out, we have to select the budget relevant movement type.
Yep, correct. So you just, exactly that. We can't hold currently. We don't have what's called project stock. So they have to procure everything to a fund center, and then they issue it out. So in the case of, let's say, assets under construction, you might have procured all of the items using a fund center related to facilities and infrastructure. And then, like an example of windows, somebody comes and says, okay, now we need to issue 50 windows out of the warehouse for this building. Then you would use that last issuance there, the budget relevant issuance, the budget relevant issuance not related to cost recovery funds to the project, if the project actually had the budget on it in the first place.
All right. Any question on this concept of issuance to projects, to internal orders, to cost centers, and the concept? So as you can see, the selection of the movement type is what we will trigger if the and also the coding block that you will have to select when doing the goods issue, right? So if you select goods issue in relation to internal order, you will need to indicate the internal order a number. The same thing for projects, right? So in the system, everything is triggered by the selection of the movement type.
But, Leandro, one thing, because this came up recently, somebody mentioned recently they had an asset under construction and they needed to deliver, I think it was gravel or sand or something to the asset under construction. In the cases where something is not delivered first to a warehouse, then we don't buy it to a storage location, we buy it as direct consumption. So in those cases, the item really never goes via the warehouse or via inventory, it just charges directly to the project, so it never sits in inventory. So those are the sorts of things. I believe DFS have defined certain instances where things don't need to be procured to a storage location and can be procured to consumption, but it's worthwhile understanding that concept as well.
All right, thank you, Chris. So remember that most of the materials are procured for inventory, except those exceptional cases of materials that are purchased for projects, okay, for AUCs, and they can be procured for consumption, right? So if they are procured for consumption, they don't affect your inventory, so they are issued out automatically, right? They are consumed and can be used by the AUC. No need to issue out from stock because they were never part of stock. Okay. So let's continue and let's talk a little bit more about non-budget relevant consumption. Okay, so Ikram is asking about more details on that, on the issuance of items to projects. Okay, so yes, you can, Ikram, sure, feel free to send an email, and then we can further discuss your specific case. Okay. So for non-budget relevant consumption, this is going to be the most typical case in the missions, right? It's going to be non-budget relevant for most of the items you issue out. And here it's very important that you select when you are, especially when you are issuing out materials out of stock using the cost center, to select the coding block, to select the fund and fund center of the storage location that is holding the inventory. So whenever you issue out from a stock, okay, that is statistical, please make sure you select the account assignment details of the storage location that has the items. Okay, and this is important to avoid further clearing in finance. Okay. So already from your both the CITS, all the CITS inventory is kept to serve the different sections in the missions as per the mission mandate. So normally all these issuance are going to be statistical and are going to be therefore non-budget relevant. Okay. So at this stage here you have screenshot of the posting in FM. So at this stage I want to show to you in the system a real case, and I also want to guide you through the job aid. So let me connect to Umoja, okay, and let me show to you, because I want to show also the available documentation you have to properly select the movement types. Okay, so here we are talking about a statistical issuance of stock. Okay, right. So while we wait to connect to Umoja, okay, if we want to know which is the proper movement type to be used in order to issue out from a stock, the first here in the list of job aids, right? In the list of job aids you have available under the, if you go down under the logistics execution, you can see, okay, you can see the tool to help you selecting the inventory movement types. All right. So this job aid, it's the first guide that you have to be comfortable with in order to select the movement types. And here you have an explanation of the different movement types that are available and can be used. I mean, here you have all the details of what you need to consider. Well, we discussed already about the type of movement, type of consumption, and effect on budget, right? We already discussed about statistical, budget relevant. What is very useful is the tool you have to properly select the different movement types. Okay, so either you want to receive items into stock, either you want to issue out, what we call consumption, either you want to transfer stock from or between different storage locations, change the status or change the material, perform returns to stock, or perform scrapping postings. Okay, so with this job aid, in this case, if we go to the part of the consumption, right, to issue out materials, so for consumption, just by clicking on that button, we can see the different types of issue out of movement type we have to issue out materials. So in relation to cost centers, in relation to projects, or in relation to internal orders. And then what we discuss, statistical, real with cost recovery, or real without cost recovery. So if we want to do statistical one, we can just click there, and in here we will see the movement type that we have to use and some details, right, of that movement type. So movement type will be 201, and then even in the account assignment we can see that we need to select fund and fund center of the issuing storage location. And for each movement type, we always have a reversal movement type. So in case you have or you posted any document with the wrong information, you can always use the reversal movement type to cancel that posting. Okay. All right. So this job aid is very useful to understand the different movement types, and it gives you also relevant information about that movement type. Okay, so let me try to connect. Okay, open. Right. Okay. So I hope you can you can see my screen in Moja. So I'm gonna open a material document posted with that movement type. Okay. For example, this one. All right. So this relates to the example we were talking about before. So in this case, we are talking about goods issue, right? So you can see in this material document posted, you can see the movement type. So it's a goods issue to cost center, okay? And in this case, it's statistical, as we can see in the job aid, okay? In the job aid for the movement types, we can see the movement type and the description. Okay, and in the account assignment, the inventory user should have used the fund and fund center linked to that storage location. So for issuance from inventory, the issuance is done from a storage location, right? So in this case, we are issuing out stock from storage location 2105 in MONUSCO, right? The ICT storage location. So that all storage locations are linked to fund and fund center. So in the account assignment, the inventory user should have indicated the account assignment details, right? The fund and fund center of the storage location. So this 10 NUA and the 20 NUA and the 10158 should be the account assignment details of the storage location. So how, as an inventory user, how can we know which are the fund and fund center linked to each storage location? And for that, I want to show to you the second job aid. All right, we have available, and it's so in the list of job aids, we have the a job aid that is called storage locations design and FM derivations. Right. So in the list of job aids, we can see this job aid that gives you for each plant, right, for all the different plants, including all the different missions. So in this case, we are talking about MONUSCO. So if we go and we click on CD10, we will see the list of all the storage locations in MONUSCO. In this case, we were talking about 2105, and we can see the account assignment details, the fund center, and functional area of that particular storage location. So it's 20 NUA 10158, and that should be the account assignment details specified when issuing out materials with statistical storage location. All right. Okay. So when using this statistical issuance, if we go to the FI document, right? If we go to the FI documents, and if we go to the funds management documents, we will see that everything that happens there, even if we can see there the postings in FM, we can see that all the postings are only for reporting purposes, right? So everything is statistical, and also we can see that the commitment items, you can see that all end with the S, meaning that are statistical commitment items. So even if you go to the FM documents and you see some lines, it doesn't mean that it had an impact in the budget. It's only for reporting purposes, and you can see that with the X in the statistical indicator and with the S at the end of the commitment item, right? So for the postings in FM and FI, this is a little bit more for the for your finance colleagues, but just to let you know that there is a job aid also with the different posting schemas. So in the general view, if you look for posting schemas, you will see the posting schemas for all the different movement types. So in LE.99, you will see the posting schema for all the different movement types. You can download that. It's an Excel file, even if it's more for the finance user. And just to let you know that your finance colleagues were also trained on the inventory postings. So in case you have doubts about the impact in FM and FI, you can always refer to your finance colleagues that should be more conversant with the postings. Okay. So this post schema Excel is this one. I'm just opening now. Okay, so where you have all the different movement types. So you here in column D, you can see the movement type. So if we look, for example, for posting movement type 201, that is the one we are now using. Okay, we can see that is a non-budget relevant issuance to cost center. You can see that there is, as you know, a reservation needed, okay, to issue out from stock with the non-budget relevant issuance. And then when posting the MIGO document, there will be this impact in FM, right, in blue, and then you can see even in green the impact in FM. Sorry, in blue was in FI and in blue in funds. Okay, this is just for your reference. Okay, so in here we just showed you an example of goods issue, statistical goods issue of a computer to another unit in the mission, and this is what is here in the screenshot. So you can see that fund and fund center is just the one that relates to the storage location, and there is a job aid indicating a different fund and fund center for each storage location. And then with the S in the commitment item and the X in the statistical indicator, you'll see that it's in reality a statistical posting in FM. Okay. All right. So this is one case when the statistical issuance is used in the missions. Another example would be in relation to a maintenance order. Okay, so for example, issuing out from engineering storage location in a mission to repair a building or to repair a vehicle that is part of the mission's mandate. Then in the maintenance order, we can also use components, right? Not only services, and we use maintenance orders. Okay, so these maintenance orders can also have components, and also if it's statistical, then the account assignment details that will be used for that maintenance orders are going to be the same of the storage location. Okay. All right. Let me show to you the this one in the system. Okay. Chris, anything to add about the statistical issuance? Let me show to you
the only thing is to bear in mind is where you actually make sure that the account assignment, when you're doing the MIGO, so basically all you need to do is to understand, you can see at the top there which storage location, plant and storage location you're issuing out from. It's in the line item detail. You can see where you're issuing out from if you scroll across. So worst comes to worst, if you can't remember, you can see that's your plant and your storage location. So you just need to make sure that those two fields up the top really are the same as the two fields in the where tab. Okay, and then you'll see, and then everything else should flow correctly from there.
Yep.
So as long as you check that those two things are the same in both, then you're okay. One thing that we see sometimes is people saying, okay, even though it's not going to affect their budget, I want to know what I've issued to ICTS or to security and those type of things. We highly recommend that you don't do that, because all of these inventory values have really small amounts. So what happens sometimes is you end up creating a lot of work for somebody in finance to clear all of these items. So we don't recommend that you do that. If you want to track it, there are probably other methods that we can show you of ways to track things.
All right, thank you, Chris. So basically here, the main thing you have to focus on, it's on the account assignment and to select the account assignment details of the source storage location. Okay, so in this particular case, it's an issue related to a maintenance order. That's why instead of movement type 201, it's 261. And this one, if we look at the item level, right, at the line item level, we can see that is related to an internal order that we can see here. So this issuance, in this case, is in relation to an internal order. So everything is derived here from the maintenance order. And we can see that the items were issued out from stock as part of the maintenance order, and the budget relevant or not is triggered by the item category, right? If it's budget relevant, in this case it's non-budget, it's a stock item non-budget, or it could have been stock item budget. But basically for the missions, if I'm not mistaken, Chris, they should always select set, right? Stock item non-budget for maintenance orders.
Yeah, no, I believe so. And you showed them, sorry, Andrew, I cut out for a second. You showed them where the account assignment information is, right?
In here, you mean in the maintenance order?
No, on the line item where they check. So once they've checked the plant and storage location, then they need to make sure that that ties up with the fund and fund center.
In the Migo, you mean, in Migo transaction?
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's go back to the Migo. All right. So
check this here.
Yeah, we need to check from where we are getting the item, right? From this storage location that has to. Then we can go to the job aid, right, to see which are the account assignment details of that storage location. So in this case, it's Pristina 1101. So we can see that is it's a HK10. So it's a Kosovo. So in 1101, storage location is linked to Fund Center 10415. So this one is the one you have to make sure that you indicate in the account assignment details, right, of when you are issuing out the materials. So in the account assignment, you have to make sure that the Fund Center and the fund are the ones related to the storage location that appear in the Where tab.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that was the one final thing I forgot to mention there. Yeah.
Okay. So thank you, Chris. All right. So that was for the statistical consumption. Let's talk about consumption for budget relevant, in this case with cost recovery. Okay. Remember that this applies only to when issuing out stock from storage locations linked to cost recovery fund, 10 RCR, 20 PCR, or 20 VLV. So at the current moment, there are not missions that have set up storage locations linked to cost recovery fund. Okay, but there are, for example, I think Chris mentioned UNAMA that wanted to set up one. So, but we have other entities, or even UNESC, but we have other entities like, for example, in this example, we have UNON that have specifically set up storage location that are related to cost recovery funds. Okay, so they have set up inventory that is used so they even get the budget, right, in order to procure these items that will be used afterwards for cost recovery activities. So when they plan for the budget in these specific cost centers under the 10RCR fund, they even have to estimate how much inventory they're going to need for these cost recovery funds. Right, Chris? So everything is planned in advance. So they get the budget in order to provide these cost recovery activities, both services and components. And as they need to keep the inventory, they set up storage locations linked to those cost recovery funds in order to keep that inventory.
Yeah, exactly. So your budget officers already know if they've got if they have budgeted for materials under a cost plan that they've put in. So you really, sometimes we get requests to set up storage locations linked to the cost recovery fund, and the mission hasn't even included the procurement of materials in the cost plan. So it is the controller's office that does sign off on the creation of storage locations linked to the cost recovery fund. So if you put in the request for the creation of cost recovery fund, request for the creation of storage location linked to cost recovery, and you haven't got it in your cost plan, the controller's office is going to say no. So that's just something to bear in mind.
Yeah. So in this case, if we look at the posting in FM, so we'll see that there is a line that is in reality budget relevant, charging the requestor of the item, okay? And then, as in all budget relevant issuance, we use, right, the account assignment details of the receiving entity. Okay, so in this case, if you are issuing out stock from Union storage location to, in this example, to OMS office, when we do the goods issue, we need to select as account assignment the fund and fund center of the OMS office that will be charged for those items. Okay, because in this case, it's a budget relevant issuance. Okay, and as you can see in this example, we are using 10RCR because we are using materials stored in a storage location linked to cost recovery fund. Okay, and if we go to the job aid for storage locations, we can go to Union, right, to K00, and we will see that there are specifically storage locations that are linked to cost recovery funds, right? All these 10RCRs, all these storage locations are meant to keep materials for cost recovery activities. So this is one example of an entity that has set up storage locations for cost recovery materials. Okay. All right. Then what else? So let's move into budget relevant without cost recovery. And we mentioned the examples of UNSO, UNSCO, and also the example of UMOGIP. And we mentioned already, we have to emphasize that this is meant to be used only in occasional scenarios. So if it's, as Chris mentioned before, if it's something you do as per your mission mandate to provide cost recovery services and materials, then the way forward is to set up cost recovery storage location. But if it's only on occasional basis, then you can use this budget relevant without cost recovery movement types to charge the requester. Okay, so some examples of usage of this budget relevant without cost recovery movement types would be the example of one-time procurement, right, or one-off procurement, something that happens that is procured on an occasional basis. So let's say that a mission has been given budget under a particular fund center to procure, okay, a small number of materials. Okay, but specifically for that particular fund center, there is no storage location. Okay, and this is not something that will happen recurrently, so it doesn't make sense to create storage location only to keep that inventory. Okay, because it's going to happen only once. Okay, so one way to work with this scenario would be to procure the item and keep those items into a different storage location, right, of UNSO, linked to a different fund center. Okay, and then afterwards, when these materials are needed by the entity that really got the budget, the items will be issued out with this budget relevant without cost recovery movement type. Okay, so that would be one example of a scenario where this budget relevant without cost recovery can be used. Right, so it's in the end we got the budget in a different fund center that doesn't have any storage location, so we purchase the items for a different storage location, and then at the time we are issuing out is at the time we really charge that fund center. Okay. Important here is to make sure that both the procurement and the issuance is done in the same budget period. Okay. Otherwise, we will have impacts in finance. Anything else to add here, Chris, about this scenario, or?
No, I don't think so. I think it's important at the end that we just leave some time for people to ask some questions, because we need to make sure that people have asked questions, and I would expect that people have plenty of questions. So let's leave the time for those.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Another example would be the example we were mentioning before about AUCs and projects. So we said that materials that needs to be kept in inventory in relation to projects and internal orders cannot be procured for inventory. Okay, so they have to be procured for a storage location, and then at the time of goods issue is where you charge the project. Okay, so items cannot be procured in relation to a project or an internal order, because when you select in the shopping cart, when you click on direct material, okay, the account assignment details come automatically from the storage location. Okay, so charging the project or the internal order, who in reality got the budget, is done at the moment of issuance, and is accomplished by using the budget relevant without cost recovery movement types. Okay, so in that case, the WBS element and or the internal order will be used in the account assignment when doing the goods issue. So that would be another example of budget relevant without cost recovery. And with budget relevant cost recovery, you will see in the posting in FM that the two different fund centers will appear. One is the sending, so one is the fund center linked to the storage location, and the other one is the fund center of the requesting entity, the one getting the materials. And you will see that in this case, the impact is going to be real. So you will not see the X in the statistical indicator, and also the commitment items are going to be the ones that don't end with the S as of a statistical. Okay. All right. Okay. Let's show this a little bit in the system. I think we have time. Let's show a budget relevant issuance. Budget relevant. Okay. All right. So in this case, we can see in the where we can see that this particular case, the movement type used is GI to cost center, but we can see in the description that is budget relevant, no cost recovery. Okay, so the materials were issued out from the storage location. In this case, it's in Unso plant. So it's storage location 4201. So we can even go back to our job aid with the different storage locations. Okay, so we can see IL10. IL10 was the plant, so it's Unso plant, and the storage location it's 4201. 4201. That is supplies. Okay. So it's the fund center related to that storage location. It's 10969. So in the account assignment, what will be in this case the account assignment used? So we can see that the account assignment used is not the one linked to the storage location. So it's not 10969, it's 10882. So because it's a budget relevant issuance, and in the account assignment we are indicating the account assignment details of the requesting entity, of the entity that is going to be charged for those materials. Okay. So you can see that in the FI documents, if we go to this, or in the FM documents, in the funds management documents, we can see that we have different lines because we have different materials. But looking at the first two, right, we can see that the fund center of the requesting entity is charged for the materials, and then we also have the fund center of the storage location that gets the amount, okay, as a negative. Okay, so we can see that the requesting entity is charged, and then we have also the impact in the fund center of the storage location. Okay, and everything, we cannot see the X in the statistical indicator, and we cannot see the S in the commitment item. All right. Okay. So this was about, I cannot see any comment in the chat. Let me see if I can put it back. All right. Okay. So let's move ahead. So the few slides that we just discussed were about consumption, right? Issuing out inventory out of stock, and now we are going to start talking about transfers, right? Transfer of inventory. In this case, transfer of inventory between storage locations. So we have to differentiate if we are talking about transfers within the same mission, right, or between different missions. If we are talking about transferring stock between storage location of the same mission, then we need to really understand if these two storage locations are linked to the same fund center. Okay, because the movement types to be used are going to be different. So if both storage locations linked to the same fund center, and we can do that by checking again the job aid, right? We can do that by checking the job aid on the FM derivations. So if we want to move stock in this example, in Unso, if we want to move stock from ICT location and between these two storage locations, these two are linked to the same fund center. So that would be one particular movement type. So in this case, if the both storage locations are linked to the same fund center, then we can use the one-step transfer or the two-step transfer. Okay, so we can use movement type 311 that will at the same time reduce stock in the source and increase it in the destination, or we can do it in 2 steps, issuing out from the source with 313 and receiving in the destination with 315. So these none of these movement types have any impact in the budget, okay, because both storage locations are linked to the same fund center. All right. Then, if the storage locations we want to move the stock between are linked to different fund center, then, okay, it's important to think to avoid as much as possible these scenarios, okay. These splice, we need to make sure we select the proper movement types, right? If we want to be non-budget relevant, we can do it with movement types 311, set11 and receive it back with set13. If we don't want to charge the receiving storage location, and if we want to make it budget relevant, then there is a different movement type, especially for the issue out step. Instead of set 11, we will use set B1. The received at destination will still be set 13. Okay. So these transfers between storage locations linked to different fund center should be avoided, but if specific case appear, you need to consider that the movement types have to be different for non-budget relevant issuance or budget relevant issuance. That you can discuss it with your finance colleagues to understand what kind of transfer you need to perform. So whenever you have questions about the specific movement types and what should be the impact in FM and FI, please contact your finance colleagues who will be able to support you in that part. All right. Then specifically for transfers that have 2 different steps, like statistical, I mean this one, two-step transfers, and these 2. Okay, you need to make sure that in the second step you indicate the same details as in the first step. For example, valuation type, serial number, batch number, and the quantities. You have to make sure that the details in the second step are the same as for the first one. And then, if you need to transfer stock between different missions, okay, so for this part is where we use the stock transport order process, okay, and movement type is automatically determined by the system based on the type of STO. Okay, so for the transfer between different missions, you don't really have to care about the movement types. It's automatically triggered by the system based on the STO details. Okay, but for the transfer within missions that are the most frequent, make sure you select the proper movement type depending. So you need to really analyze the fund center of both the source and the destination storage location. Okay. All right. I'm seeing some questions in the chat, but are not so related with this slide. So we can leave it to the end, and then we will discuss about those questions. Okay, Agustin and Ikram. Okay. Transferring. We also have the transfer material to material. So in case we have stock of one material, but in reality it's a different material. So there are also some movement types to accomplish that part. But if you want to do a transfer material to material, the planning part is very important. So you need to analyze what kind of material, what are the characteristics of the source material and what are the characteristics of the receiving material. So the things you need to consider are the moving average price. Okay. So the transfer might impact the valuation price. Okay. So you need to consider if any adjustments are required in the MAP. Okay, of the either the source or the destination material. Okay, so you need to consider the moving average price. You need to consider also the material characteristics, right, both of the source and of the destination. You need to consider if any of those are fixed assets materials, if they are serialized or batch managed, if they are split valuated, meaning they consider old versus new materials, which is the unit of measure of each material. All right, and for this complex process, you have a very detailed job aid that was created for the GDP implementation, okay, by our finance colleagues, but it's very detailed and it gives you a lot of details about the different steps you need to perform when transferring between different materials. Okay, it's not only about transferring between materials, it also gives you all the details, but it's very convenient for you to review this job aid and get familiar with the different details. Okay, you can find it in the general part of the job aid, and it's called SRM Downstream Issues Correction POs for Inventory. Okay, and there, depending on the type of material to material transfer, you will have the steps that you need to perform to do it, including what you need to consider in case if it's you are transferring from a serialized to non-serialized, from a split valuated to a non-split valuated, and etc. Okay, so please review this job aid. It will provide you with a lot of information on that regard. Okay. All right. One last thing before we go into the questions and answers, we want to reemphasize the importance of the valuation type in all inventory postings. Okay, so many materials are split valuated. Okay, so you can differentiate in your stock how many you have as old and how many you have as new. And remember that in your inventory, old materials have zero value, okay? Or all materials should have zero value. So when posting any material documents, you have to really pay attention to the valuation type you select. Okay, so when posting receipts, okay, these receipts are normally done against a purchase order. So normally all these receipts appear as new, and the moving average price is automatically updated based on the price, right, and the standard associated costs. But then from there, consumption. So if you issue out a material or if you transfer a material between storage locations, you need to make sure you select which type of material you want to transfer or you want to issue out. If you are issuing out new or you are issuing out an old one. Okay, so that will have an impact also in the FM and FI posting, because old have zero value in your inventory, so all postings will appear as zero value because you are really issuing out or transferring all materials. For the returns and additions to stock, right, most of the returns back to stock will be related to used items, okay, unless you issued out in error something and you want to return it back to stock. So all the returns should be normally come into stock as old, but anyway, you still have some movement types in case you want to add into stock or you want to return to stock an item as new because of an error or because it was never really used. But keep in mind that this valuation type is something that has an impact. So selecting the wrong valuation type has really an impact in the financial statements, okay? And you should really look into that field carefully when, for example, receiving items into stock. So receiving items as new or as old has an impact in your inventory holdings, okay? So new will have a value and will increase your inventory holdings, and the opposite thing for the old materials where they have always zero value. The same thing for transferring items, if you are transferring new versus old, okay? So keep an eye when you are posting transfers, receipts, issuance. Keep an eye if you are really talking about new materials or old materials, because that will increase or decrease your stocks, and based on the type will increase your inventory values or not. Okay, and in this last slide you have the different job aids. So the one we showed about the movement types, the one we showed about the derivation of each storage location, the one about the downstream issues, the one we showed, I mean, we didn't show it, but the one we discussed that could help you for the material to material transfer. Okay, so here you have a description and also the link, the posting schema, the Excel file, and lastly a job aid more for your finance colleagues on the explanation on the FI and FM impact of the inventory. Okay, so where your inventory, how your inventory is treated in the finance module. Okay, so now I finished the presentation, so it's time for questions. Okay, if you want to, let me just read the one that Augustine asked, okay, and Ikram, and then if you want to ask other questions, you can unmute yourself or write it in the chat. So Augustine, your question is about which cost center should be used at the shopping cart for budget relevant without cost recovery. Okay, so budget relevant without cost recovery. So we said we had two different examples, right, of budget relevant without cost recovery. The example of the project that we said that at the moment we cannot purchase anything in relation to a project and then keep it in inventory. Okay, so basically when you purchase, you will not indicate any cost center. Okay, you will indicate the storage location, and then that will automatically derive the fund and center. Then the items will appear in the inventory of stock. You will have the account assignment details of the receiving entity, the one that has to be charged. Can you still hear me? Because Ikram is saying that my voice is broken. What about the others?
Yeah, you were broken for a bit. You sort of cut out. It just jumbled up, and then we missed most of it. So basically,
Okay.
in summary, what I thought you said was, Augustine's question was about using shopping carts.
Yeah.
So within a shopping cart, obviously, you can either purchase things to inventory, so they're going to be delivered and operationally managed as inventory. So they first come into inventory, into the warehouse, or you can purchase them directly to consumption, in which case they never go into inventory. So in the case of what you said for inventory is obviously they don't select a cost center or a fund or anything even when they're doing their procurement to direct inventory. They're just selecting the storage location. And by selecting the storage location, that derives the correct account assignment elements to fund the fund transfer.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's afterwards, if they need to do the issuances out to affect budget, that they would do that. So if they've got, if they are using a cost recovery fund for services and they do need to procure materials related to that, presumably they would have put in a cost plan for the procurement of those materials. And if they haven't got a storage location set up, then they need to basically put in the request to have it set up. And as mentioned, the first thing the controller's office is going to do is see whether you budgeted for materials in the first place.
Okay. Yeah. So Augustine, did that answer your question? So basically, at the moment of the shopping cart, you only have to take care of the selection of the storage location, and then when you issue out, then is when you indicate the account assignment details of the requesting entity. Thank you, Chris. What else? We have Ikram asking about the transfers of items between storage locations that are linked to different fund centers, but to the same fund. So if that's the case, remember what we mentioned before. So let me go back to the slide, okay, of transfers. So for transfers, if both storage locations are linked to the same fund and fund center, then it's going to be you can use either 311 one step or 313 and 315. And then if they are linked to different fund centers, even if they both belong to the same fund, then you need to use these movement types starting with a Z. Okay. All right. Ali, regarding scrapping, we didn't.
Sorry,
yes.
Leandro,
Yeah.
1 second. Can you unmute Muriel because she's having problems?
Yes, sorry. Sorry, Muriel. So Muriel, you are now unmuted. Sorry about that.
Just on that statement as well for the transfer within the plan, we don't really recommend that you use these transfer movement types at all, honestly, when you're transferring between two storage locations in the same plant, because they don't create a financial posting. So we generally recommend if you need to transfer inventory, you issue it out from one and then you receive it back into the other. So try to avoid doing it in the first place, but if you're absolutely going to do it, you must make sure that the fund and fund center for both storage locations are the same. The reason is, even if it's within the same fund, for reporting purposes, some of the missions go in and they'll say, okay, what actual inventory do I have under this self-accounting unit, for instance? And in financial accounting, if you haven't got the posting, it's going to think it's still sitting in one storage, it's sitting in one fund center. But in actual instance, in the logistics execution, you might have sent it to another fund center and then completely issued it out. So we don't recommend that you do the transfer between storage locations in the same plant at all using these. But if you're going to, you must make sure that the fund and fund center for both storage locations are the same. Otherwise, as Leandro said, use Z11 and Z13.
All right. Thank you, Chris. Muriel, do you want to add anything?
I just wanted to just give a few talking points upon some things that we noticed during the inventory cleanup, where a lot of the missions were using different movement type 309 to move inventory between different storage locations or different from one material to another.
Muriel, I think, sorry, you're going to have to sit a bit closer to the speaker because you're really faint.
Any better?
Yeah, that's a lot better.
I don't even know where the speaker is on this device. No, I was just talking about some of the issues we saw during the inventory cleanup related to using movement type 309, which is a movement type between material to material, where you have quantity in one and it should be moved to another material because it was purchased incorrectly. I don't know, it was goods receipt into the wrong material, whatever. That movement type is a little tricky, and if any missions are using that movement type, they should please speak with finance people before attempting to do 309 transactions, please.
Yeah, and on that as well, those, when they're fixing up, when you guys are fixing up problems created through your shopping carts and trying to do transfers, all of the information of the various steps that you need to do and what you need to consider is in that job aid that was written. So don't just guess, go in and read the job aid to make sure you understand what you're doing. And if you don't, if you want, as Muriel said, you really should make sure that your finance colleagues are working closely on this with you when you need to do these sorts of things. Because we saw lots of errors. We saw transfers of new into old. We saw transfers between two materials where the moving average price was completely ruined on both materials. So it's really important that you understand what you're doing. So read that a couple of times, and then go and talk to your finance colleagues as well.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's a good point. Okay, so basically the job aid. Okay, just to make sure that you are all familiar. So this is basically this one. It's the one that is very complete on the different things you need to consider in order when you are doing, for example, a material-to-material transfer, or you want to do a transfer between storage locations. So it's this POs for inventory, and there you have a very good structure, right? So you can see the different things you need to consider and the different types of errors, right? So errors in materials or product IDs, or errors in quantity, errors in the different storage location, right? So here you have a very good index, and in each type, for example, in this type 1.1, so fixed asset material was used incorrectly, and it should have been non-fixed asset, right? So depending, if you select this one and you click on there, you will see the different steps you need to think about, and you will need to do in order to solve the error. Okay. So as Chris was saying, please carefully review this job aid, and especially the cases you want to fix, and then you can further discuss with your finance colleagues or even with us, okay, to address the problem. Okay, I think Hatim raised the hand, so let me unmute you. I know that we are a little bit over time. Sorry about that. Okay, Hatim, please go ahead.
Hi, Leandro, and hi, everybody. Just have 2 questions about, let's say, maintenance service, because in the end, we're going to end up issuing material from our inventory. Let's say transport, they appreciated service order, they added all the components for the spare part that has to be fixed in the car, and then the service order has been approved and released. And we know here the reservation is going to be generated and approved automatically. And then they can do the good issue based on the order, right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
But if we're maintaining, the question, if we're maintaining the car in the mission, has to be statistical. But we have challenges in our missions. We are providing maintenance for other entities, like let's say OCHA, UNICEF, WFP. We're maintaining their car, we're fixing material in the cars, and we're issuing material from our inventory. But this should be real and with cost recovery. But really here, our guys actually, we did not end up with the procedures to do this kind of cost recovery.
Yeah. Okay, so this is a really important point. Okay, which mission are you with?
MONUSCO.
MONUSCO.
MONUSCO. Okay, MONUSCO. So if you are doing these sorts of activities, they're cost recovery because they're not related to your mandated activities. Your mandated activities don't include providing service to WFP or to OCHA or the others to repair their cars. Now, in order to do these activities, presumably, I don't know, you've got a cost plan for the service side of things. You need to make sure that the materials are included in there, and then you need to procure items under the cost recovery fund for this. If you're doing it now and again, then, you know, there are ways that we could do small issuance of inventory out, but you cannot do cost recovery under the mission fund. The reason is because you have a certain amount of money that the member states have given for your mission, and we can't reallocate money back. Because what ends up happening, let's say you have $1 million, right? You don't have a lot more than that, but let's say you had $1 million. The member states have approved $1 million, right? You've got your allotment for $1 million. Now, if you're doing cost recovery activities under there, in order to give you the money back, they have to give you more budget. So you'd end up in a situation where your allotments were greater than your appropriations, which obviously can't be. So we don't. So in cases where you're doing a lot of this activity, my recommendation really is to put it down on paper, look at what sort of numbers that we're talking about, and if it is a significant amount of work that you're doing for OCHA and WFP and others, I'm not saying don't do it. What I'm saying is contact the controller's office and put together a cost plan for this and say, I want to buy so many carburetors or whatever under the cost recovery fund and keep them in a separate storage location for these activities. Okay, and if you have to borrow from one of your storage location funds occasionally for the others, you could use those, you could use the issuance out that we talked about.
Okay.
Meaning issuing from one to the other. In any case, we can take this offline, but it's really important that everybody understand this. If you're doing these sorts of activities and you want to charge other people, but the materials have been procured using the mission fund, those are not part of your mandated activities. So you're just opening up a can of worms unless you've set it up properly.
Yeah, because it's really serious, very serious issue. And if you don't mind, I can take this offline with you, and then we can communicate.
Yeah,
if you're not supported, we can talk about it.
Yeah.
Exactly. The first thing you need to do is to put together a cost plan, because as soon as you go to the controller's office, they're going to say, what sort of money are we talking about here? So put together a cost plan, even if you just do a mock-up one saying, look, we charge them this for services and this for spare parts, then, yeah. So I'm talking about all of the other activities that you do that don't relate to your mission-mandated activities, okay? OCHA, WFP, everybody, okay? Put together in a cost plan, work with your budget officer. If you like, feel free to reach out and send me an email afterwards, and I'll put you on the right track.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much, Chris. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Hatim. And I think that question not only applies to MONUSCO, but there are other missions that are doing similar activities. So please, it's very important that you follow the same approach, right? So if you're providing kind of regular services, okay, the way through is to set up storage locations for that. Okay, it's not the occasional. Is not to use the value relevant without cost recovery that we said it was only for occasional basis. Okay, so we also have connected King Wee, okay, from the Umoja Coordination Service. So I think he also wanted to say something. I don't know if he's online or not. So please go ahead, King Wee, if you're online.
Yes. Good afternoon. I just wanted to add a little bit on the storage locations discussion and the use of the movement type for budget relevant non-cost recovery. We receive occasionally receive requests from missions to create new storage locations, and we frequently will ask if the purpose for creating the storage locations will be for one-off or small procurement of goods, or will it be something that is sustained and ongoing and significant? The reason for that is that if you have an instance where you do not have a storage location created for a particular fund center, but just so happens, it could be, and it's something that's relating to, HR or something relating to public information. It just so happens that they needed to procure, some paper or some banners or something that is, a one-off procurement. Then in those cases, occasionally, we would recommend that you can raise the shopping cart using the storage location that's already configured. It could be something that is a storage location for supplies or for ICT. You can procure those with existing storage locations first, receive them into that inventory, and then issue to this other cost center on a budget-relevant non-cost recovery basis. As you know, the effort that's needed to create and to maintain a storage location is quite significant. So one of the reasons for creating this type of movement type for budget-relevant non-cost recovery is to address these one-off occasions when you need to buy something and you do not have a storage location. So that's just to, just as a little bit of background on the reasons for having these movement types. Thank you.
So thank you, Kinwi. All right. So I mean, this complements what we were saying before, right? So if it's something that happens on occasional basis, then we can do the budget-relevant non-cost recovery. But if it's something that it's recurrent, like Hatim was saying about these maintenance services that MONUSCO is providing, then we have to plan it well in advance, and we have to even plan for the budget, right, for those for the materials and for the services we provide as cost recovery. Okay. So in the chat, we don't have further questions. I mean, we have one from Agnui about a specific case of a change from material to material, but I think we can manage that offline. Anything else you would like to add? Anybody? I think we also have connected, I don't know, I think Rafael was there from the Logistics Support Division as an expert in inventory and logistics. I don't know if he's online or not. Okay, but I'll share the presentation anyway, and also the recording, because this one has been recorded, so you can share it with other colleagues. And please make the effort to communicate and to spread the message to your colleagues in the mission. Okay.
Andrew.
Yes.
Yes, can you hear me? Yes, I'm Rafael. I just want to make a remark that, as you correctly mentioned, everything is deriving from the logistics side on the goods issue and based on the movement type. But the start of the process is when the stock reservation is created. At that point in time, it is the requisitioner who selects the movement type. And based on the movement type, it will be approved. It can be one step or two step. It can be the certifying officer plus the inventory senior user, and this is a key step in the process, because they need to certify that the users are using the correct movement type. So it's only to make a remark for these two key persons, the certifying officers and the inventory senior users, to double check. And then before issuing out, you can see that in the material document they must have this reservation tab, which is linked to the stock reservation. I know that in the past and during the ramp-up, we used some workarounds, and maybe they're still using this in the missions and skipping this process. So we need to prevent this, especially for reporting purposes, for audit purposes, that all the issuance from stock must come from a reservation. So this is just a remark.
Thank you, Rafael. Yeah, so most of the movement types have to come from a reservation document, right? And depending of the type, if it's budget relevant or not, it will have to be approved by certifying officer, but reservations always go through the approval of the inventory senior user. So it's always a good practice and a proper way to do it, to plan all the postings with the reservation document. Okay, so thank you for the message, Rafael. Okay, so I think we are already 20 minutes ahead of time. So we didn't cover everything, but as we were saying, so please take your time to spread the knowledge within the mission, okay? And while we're seeing your questions and your comments by email, we might organize further sessions to reinforce some of the ideas, for example, of returns to stock or transfers. So depending on your feedback and the type of issues that come from your side, we might address or we might organize additional sessions. Okay. So thank you very much for joining, and have a good day. Yeah, thank you very much, Chris. Thank you, Muriel, and everybody for attending.